Hi Saket, how are you?
Hi Abhimanyu, I'm absolutely fine. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much. First of all, thank you for accepting to do this session with me.
Thank you for inviting me to do this.
Perfect. So, now normally, how I start off is, or I always believe that whatever we do as adults, the seeds are somewhere planted as children for us, right? So I'd like to understand exactly what your childhood was like and how your education was.
It's a valid point. Uh, I feel it's either we carry on what we have learned as children, or we at some point tend to rebel against it. My childhood was fairly normal, fairly common. I come from a very regular middle class family, Maharashtrian family, and I grew up in Solapur. Even though I've been uh, living in Pune for the last 10 years now. But the first 18 years of my life, I was in Solapur. That was actually my world in the broadest sense. All my emotions, all my imagination was somehow linked to this place. And even though it was very, it has its own extremes. So people tend to joke about the summers, for example. They are extremely hot, and it's absolutely true. Despite just being about 250 kilometers away from Pune, it's quite a different climate Solapur has. And in spite of all this, there's a certain barrenness to it as well. But in spite of all this, I really loved the place since I was a kid. And it was, I would say, it was a fairly normal childhood. I did have some uh, things that happened in the family that sort of shaped some of my ideas, some of my convictions. But I could only understand this later in my life. I would say I was quite a self ignorant person till I was 18 years old. I was just doing what everyone else was doing. I was going to school first, then I was going to college. I was good at all those things. So I was simply doing, like, I was simply studying and watching films or playing video games, etc.
Okay.
So
So
that's pretty much it.
what happened at the age of 18?
So I basically moved to Pune at the age of 18. I wanted to become a chartered accountant back then, and even the that idea wasn't really my own. I was absolutely I used to idolize a cousin of mine, and she wanted to do that. And I was like, oh, absolutely crazy about her, and I'm going to do everything she does because she's wonderful. And that was sort of a very naive idea, which I was forced to acknowledge in the very first few months after shifting to Pune. And Pune was suddenly a much larger city. The sheer physical distances that used to overwhelm me. And the first, so I had actually finished or completed the passed the entrance test for chartered accountancy. But the next phase of it was suddenly very boring for me. Uh, I did not see that coming, and a few people in my family thought that it was because of the change of the environment that I was going through something like that. Because suddenly I had no friends in the new city. I was staying with my brother and my sister-in-law, and they had their jobs, so and IT jobs at that. So they used to be away for a long time, and I used to then finish my classes. I used to go back home, and I was very lonely. And later, it actually triggered a proper phase of depression.
Okay.
So the change that I went through wasn't really like a very conscious rebellion. It I was forced to go through that,
Okay.
and only after a few years that I saw the necessity of that change, even though it came through a very negative phase. It was somehow needed. 8th, ninth standard onwards, I was conscious that I really liked English.
Okay.
Uh, so that was and even after 10th, I actually wanted to become a professional musician.
Okay.
Uh, because that was a major part of my life, music, and I didn't have any training as such. I just liked to do that, and ever since I had my the two teeth removed as because of an accident when I was a kid, I could whistle really well. So
Okay.
it's a very strange thing to do on your own, but I used to whistle all the time, and I could imitate all the tunes that I heard. And as I grew up, I realized that I was actually doing something that requires a decent understanding of music.
Hmm.
And I was actually already doing that. So I thought I would love to do this professionally. But my parents thought the field of music is quite unstable. Even though you are a good musician, you might not find work.
Hmm.
So it's a very difficult field to depend on. And back then, I didn't really resist this, even though I sort of had this argument that even though I would be poor in the future, it will be fine. So I had already sensed this thing back then, that money wasn't as important to me as doing something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that is when the change started happening, I would say, because I
Okay.
was then doing something different. And even though I was convinced initially, the conviction sort of fell apart uh, after a point. So that was the change that happened very substantially, very uh, properly at the age of 18 or 19, I would say.
Okay. Okay. Got it. So, uh, uh, then from wanting to become a chartered accountant, uh, you actually started studying languages. So, how was that, and why did you choose German as the language that you wanted to study?
In Solapur itself, I had read a couple of English translations of some of Franz Kafka's stories, and I was really impressed by them. So I
Okay.
thought I would like to read this literature in its original language eventually, and
Mm.
that was sort of how it started.
Okay.
And I was absolutely interested in German later. And by the end of the first year at Ferguson College, I thought, oh, no, this is something I like much better than English. And I thought, okay, German seems to be, first of all, I like the language a lot and I'm good at it. I would like to see where this goes. So it started with that.
Okay. And then you moved to Germany. Basically, right now you're in Germany. So can you tell me exactly how this journey was from, studying German to actually moving to Germany?
After a point, I suppose everyone has this wish to visit the place where the language comes from. It was a very conscious choice for me. There were a couple of opportunities in the past as well where I could have visited Germany. This is my first time actually, and
Okay.
I'm here for a year.
Mm.
Uh, and this is exactly what I wanted back then. So
Okay.
I didn't want to get a scholarship for a 1 month course because first of all, I just didn't want to do a course here and
Mm.
spend all my time just in a classroom. Uh, and 1 month, somehow I felt back then as well, 1 month wouldn't be enough.
Okay. Exactly what do you do there? So when you said social service, what is it that you do there?
There's a very well established concept here of a special needs school. So it entails both physical as well as mental disability. So students who are also simply physically differently abled, they get to go to this school as well if they so wish. Uh, that's the minimum requirement. And it's also for children with mental disabilities as well as actual disorders.
Mm,
So how the system or how it functions is, there are all these children, students, and there are teachers who have trained to teach at special needs schools. So they are aware of many of the disabilities, many of mental disorders, etc.
okay.
And they are in charge of a small number of kids. But since every kid requires a different kind of attention, they also require assistants
Okay.
who can sort of act as a bridge between the kids and the teachers.
Okay.
So the teacher has to lead the entire group while considering each and everyone's requirements, and sometimes it's difficult. So the
Okay.
assistants are there to help the teacher as well as help the students, and I am one such assistant.
Oh, okay.
So I am at the moment I am in charge of a 9-year-old autistic boy, and the teacher tries to develop the course material in such a way that everyone's needs are accommodated. But sometimes so this boy, sometimes he has an emotional breakdown. He
Okay.
can't handle the pressure of what the class is doing,
Mm,
so it's difficult for him. So
mm,
my job then becomes to intervene, s- and to tell him, let's take a step outside, let's go outside the classroom for a second, let's sit down, you tell me what the problem is, and we'll try to figure out what we can do about it. So it gives him a little break from what's happening. uh, like that. This is just one example, and there are like multiple scenarios that come up, and then I have to sort of uh, react. Sometimes the teacher asks me specifically to take a break with him. Then
okay.
we go out into the schoolyard, and he loves to go on the swing. So we just take a 5-minute break. He goes on the swing, I push him, and he relaxes a little bit. And then we go back to the classroom, like that. So this is sort of my job. And I don't have any prior experience, or I didn't have any prior experience with uh, children with mental disabilities. So it was actually very overwhelming for me in the beginning. But that was just the first couple of weeks because I was emotionally, mentally absolutely ready. And
Okay.
they had made it very clear in the beginning itself that we might have to do, or we should be able to, we should be prepared to do everything the child requires. That's it. If that means cleaning their nappies, you have to step up and you have to do it. The
Okay.
teachers do it as well, and I have to do it as well. So it's like that. So
Okay.
it's all sort of there's no, so it's actually being the kid's parent at school. I would like to describe it like that.
How do the two of you bond now?
Now, okay. There was a break of almost 6 weeks now because of the pandemic, because of the corona crisis. So the schools are still shut, but now the volunteers or the all, like assistants like us, they've been allowed by the German government to go and help the kids even at their home if the
Oh,
parents require some assistance.
okay.
And I started doing that just yesterday. Uh,
Okay.
and I found out yesterday when I went there that his mother doesn't really need help with him as such. It's just that he's absolutely frustrated. He's getting bored just sitting at home all this time. And I I was supposed to go there to uh, bring in some change to his routine, and he was so happy to see me.
Wow.
I felt as if I felt I was his friend. I was as his friend there to play
Mm,
with him, to do some maths with him, to learn German with him.
mm.
So that's exactly what we did. We did some mathematical exercises the teacher had shared with them, and then we did some language exercises as well. And ultimately, we played Super Mario together, and he was absolutely happy. So yeah, our bond is a very intimate one, I would say. And he considers me to be one of his friends and one of his close friends, I would say, because he kept telling his mother that, and for him, it's very difficult to talk about his emotions in a very uh, theoretical manner. We do that, like normal individuals do that all the time. We say, I am sad, I am happy, etc. But for him, it's difficult to understand what's going on with him and say it in those words. And in spite of that, he said a few times, I'm missing Saket. When is the school reopening? Like that. So we have a very intimate bond, and I've come to love the guy basically because when you spend so much time with such an innocent, loving soul, it's just a natural occurrence, I suppose.
Uh, yeah, that's nice. So, I mean, everything or most of the things that you've described so far seem to be unconventional. So, is there any other unconventional stuff that you've also done, not only over there in Germany, but in the last 10 years when you were in India as well?
uh, Unconventional, uh, i would I would say something that I do becomes unconventional because it doesn't go with the profession I have chosen.
Mm,
Uh, so I am also interested in theater, for example, and
okay.
I've been writing plays for the last 3 4 years, and I've been participating in a German theater competition which is held every year in Pune, for example,
Okay.
which is not necessarily every German teacher is doing. uh, or I also translate uh, German stories into Marathi that I've been doing
Oh,
for 5 years now almost. Ever
wow.
since I was a master's student, I started it as yeah, it was 5 years ago. I was doing MA in German, and my professor has a magazine. She runs, or she is the editor of the magazine that publishes stories which are translated from foreign languages into Marathi,
Okay.
excluding English. So they don't publish stories translated from English, but
Okay.
all other languages are welcome as long as the people are translating them into Marathi. And
Okay.
I was again, it was just I was interested, and I thought I would give it a shot.
Mm,
And I translated a couple of stories. I submitted them to her, and she said, "Yeah, well done, good job. We'll publish them." And it started like that. And then I simply continued doing that whenever I got some time, whenever I came across some interesting story. I thought about the same story in Marathi, or I thought about like shifting the culture. How
mm.
would this story take place in the Marathi cultural context?
Oh, okay.
So that was one thing. One thing I did start doing when I moved to Pune 10 years ago, learning to play guitar.
Okay.
And initially, again, I'm a self-taught musician, so I went to a class for the first couple of months,
Mm,
but I started getting bored there because they were teaching me songs everyone else was playing.
okay.
And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to play my music, and I wanted the teacher to teach me my music. But
Okay.
since the class was for many people, the teacher didn't really have time just for me. And I started then learning on my own. I played horribly in the beginning. It was, it didn't sound anything like what I was listening to. I was playing with wrong tuning. I had no idea what standard tuning meant. I didn't know what when to change strings. So I was playing with rusty strings. Everything that could go wrong was already going wrong with my guitar, and I was still playing. And one by one I started understanding how it works. So tuning, I learned how to tune the guitar.
Mm,
I learned some basic chords. Then I started coming up with different variations.
mm.
And so it's been a very slow progress for me, but that's something I've kept doing for over 10 years now. So that's been a very major part of my life. And a few other things. I have recently started a comic strip, uh,
Oh, okay.
uh, which I'm publishing on Instagram. I have also started training myself uh, in the visual media. So I've started like drawing very specifically, doing certain things, painting as well as playing with colors, like that. So that's been one of the recent hobbies.
Okay.
So I don't know if this constitutes to something unconventional, but I suppose the combination
Yeah,
is something that you don't find in each and every person.
exactly.
All these things
So
together.
that's all of this is, at least for me, individually within itself is also very unconventional. But like you said, that a combination of all of it makes it extremely uncomfortable, right? And I got to know about these traits of yours, and that is precisely the reason why I wanted to do this interview. So the natural question that comes to my mind is why? I mean, why do you do all of this?
Mhm. Uh, the simplest answer is, or actually, the answer is that simple. I'm simply interested. I'm simply interested in all these things and I want to try them out. I want to simply see what I can do. Once I start doing something, I understand that my brain can do even this and that, and I don't expect any progress or anything concrete as such. I just simply want to sit down and paint something. So I sometimes paint horribly bad landscapes, but it doesn't stop me from painting, because the ultimate painting as a concrete thing is not really important to me, or it is up to a certain level, but that's not the only important thing. What's more important to me is that I sit down and I do something like this.
Okay. But didn't you ever feel like pursuing one particular thing like most of us do in our careers, and then slowly become a master of that thing and get very well highly paid for doing that just one thing very well. So didn't you think that a life can be lived like that?
uh, Definitely, I would say I did want to become very good at German, and I still do. I mean, it's not like I've reached the
Mm,
pinnacle of mastery. Uh, I still want to become better,
mm,
but the voices or these other things that I wish to do, they were very strong, these desires. So I didn't want to use all my time doing only German.
okay.
So initially, it was just a combination. I started then translating German stories into Marathi. So I was still doing that, or my plays were in German.
Right.
So again, that had something to do with German.
Right.
But at the same time, I was reading a lot of English, a lot of Marathi.
Mm,
So I still want to write in English. I want to, or I've been writing in English. I want to write in Marathi as well. Uh, so all these other things are very important to me, and I don't want to wait till I'm 40 or wait till I'm 50, get enough money, and then do it as a retired old man. It doesn't somehow work for me.
How do you find time to do all of this?
So the outcome or the output is the creative output is just part of it. There's a lot that's happening in my mind all the time.
Okay,
So I find time in the sense I don't expect results right away.
okay.
So I spend a lot of time just doing all these things,
Mm,
and when it ultimately comes out, it feels like there are multiple things coming out simultaneously. So it feels as if I'm working on many things at the same time and just producing and spending all my time on that, which is not true.
mm,
I think of comics when I'm driving to my German class, for example,
mm.
uh, or I think of stories when I'm jogging.
Okay. Now, as you know, I mean, I'm doing this series for people who are possibly not happy with their careers, who want to make a shift, but the feeling that the livelihood that they are winning through the uh, through the career that they have chosen, that is very important. Okay. Whereas here you are, on the other hand, I mean, of course, what you're doing as your main job, that is a German professor, that would be paying you a livelihood, but then here you are doing, you know, five, six, seven other things that don't necessarily win you or pay you directly. So you
True.
mentioned that initially, you right at the beginning, you thought that uh, money doesn't motivate you, or money is not that important. But don't you feel that after, let's say, settling down or after getting married, your perspective about life will have to change?
In a way, this question itself uh, implies that I'll eventually get married and
Okay.
start a family and will do everything what other people are doing, and somehow will have to give up my rebellion and join, like, get down from my high hill and join the common
So you
people.
don't plan on
Uh,
doing that?
Marriage is absolutely a natural thing, I suppose, but not the way we do it. Uh, it's not just two people coming together and living together or deciding to spend their lives with each other, which is absolutely a natural thing to do, I suppose. But I don't understand the money that goes into a wedding, for example, or the money that goes into a honeymoon. Uh, and you have to come up with all this money. So there's this pressure. Whereas if you say, I don't want to do it like this, I don't want to do it the way other people are doing, I want to do uh, something, again, as you said, unconventional, just for the sake of it,
Mm,
and just for the heck of it. Uh, I would like to do something like that. Let's have fun. I'm very much for that, and that means doing things differently to begin with, because we are definitely not having as much fun as we could be having. So that's my idea. And to have fun, I suppose, we simply need to change our attitude towards a lot of things, and make things playful,
mm,
and not get angry and frustrated, which is just an attitude. And if you reinforce that attitude all the time, if you think that, oh, it's expected, or it's very natural to be angry, it's very natural to be frustrated, that's going to keep happening. Whereas if you see, oh, I don't have to, no one is forcing me to be angry, it's just me. And if I want to do something else, I could also be laughing when uh, I spoil something in the kitchen or something spills,
Mm,
I can simply laugh and laugh at myself and say, "Oh, this is so silly." I'm not, again, I can't even say that I will definitely do one of them, all of them, etc. because still there's no plan as such. I don't mean to plan everything for me and someone else to simply join in. There should be some girl who should just join in into my plan, and then kids should join in whenever they are ready. It's not like that. This is not my plan for other people to join in. Uh, I want to, if I ever had a partner, I want to have a very dynamic relationship where you consider the other person to be a different person and
mm,
you consider everything that goes with that. Then
mm.
those are completely different emotions, different wishes, everything like that.
Okay.
So I don't want to have, again, the words that we use, to have, uh, I don't want to have this plan. I don't want to own anything. I don't want to be control, etc. I want to play. I want to have fun.
Okay. So essentially, if I got you right, is that you're not against the concept of marriage or the concept of having a family. It is just that everything else that is associated with it, which you're supposed to do, for example, have a lavish wedding and spend lakhs of rupees on that, you're opposed to the concept of that per
Yeah.
se. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm absolutely opposed to the concept of taking these things for granted. That is my problem. If you actually wish to have a lavish wedding and if you want to spend uh, all your savings of the 20s on your wedding, that is fine. But if you actually really wish that, and not because that's something
There's a
that you
pressure.
saw and wanted to imitate.
Okay. Okay. That's
So I'm not against these concepts. I'm opposed to falling for them blindly. So simply being aware of what you really want to do or want to have, uh, just knowing that is good enough for me. Marriage is between two existing adults, and children are coming to them or coming through them. So if you don't have, for example, if you don't have enough funds for yourself, uh, you're basically like running out of food at the party and you are inviting more people to join. uh, it doesn't make any sense to me. And fortunately we live in such times where you can uh, be married, you can have a relationship without having to have kids. If we are not ready to give them time, which is all that they actually need from us, someone being there for them through everything, that's all they need. And if we are not ready to give them that time, we shouldn't be having kids. As simple as that. So if we are not even able to meet their psychological, basic psychological demands, they are going to have all sorts of problems that come out of it.
Okay. Okay. That's
Yeah.
amazing. So I think we are just coming towards the end of it. It was amazing, listening to you, and all the thoughts about life that you shared were amazing. So great. I mean, just as we wrap up, do you have any final thoughts? Because, like this is for people who are not necessarily very happy with their career choices so far. So, any final thoughts for them?
I would just like to say there's nothing like this is the end. So there's always time, there's always possibilities for you to learn something new, and that is going to enrich your lives, and that is going to also help you in a very concrete way. So I would just like to tell people to keep learning new things and simply experiment or give time allowed themselves a little more freedom and a little more uh, eccentric choices, I would say. Just have fun and just put aside the fear of things for a while, because that's a major barrier, I suppose. The fear of consequences, or the fear of going wrong, etc. This fear is not really needed in the day-to-day life. We can simply put it aside and try out some really fun things, and that would be, I would really like to see my fellow people doing things like that. That's it.
Okay. Awesome. So I think that brings us to the end of the session for today. Thank you so much for accepting to do this, because it was a fun session, but filled with a lot of revelation, I'm sure, for whoever is listening as well. So thank you so much, and thank you for accepting to do this. And I will see
Thank you
you.
again for inviting me and giving me the space and time to talk about what I'm doing and everything that I had to say. Thank you.
You deserve it. Thank